Review, Poetry Ireland Review, The Fiddlehead, Misna, Fia, Onkali Magazine, Ogre Magazine, Fantasy Magazine, and elsewhere. Thank you so much for joining us, AbuBakr. The next panelist is Zainab Ilyasu Bobi. She is a Nigerian Hausa multidisciplinary artist, poet, and a licensed medical laboratory scientist from Bogi. She authored the chapbook Cadaver of Red Roses, winner of the 2023 Derrickott Edie Prize and winner of the inaugural Following Shaw Editors Poetry Prize 2023, Labari Poetry Prize 2023, the inaugural Akachi Chukwuemeka Prize for Literature 2023, and Gimba Suleiman Hassan Gimba ESQ Poetry Prize 2022. She is the first beneficiary of Caroline Micklem Scholarship. The next panelist is a friend. Sada Malumfashi is a writer and cultural curator. He is the founder of Open Arts, a literary and arts collective where he curates the Hausa International Book and Arts Festival. His fiction has appeared in Lone Way, Bakr Magazine, Transition Magazine, and New Orleans Review. He is an alumni of the European Union's Global Cultural Relations Program, where he co-founded RIMA, a platform that empowers emerging creative practitioners from the Global South by connecting them with international opportunities for funding and mobility. He's a 2022 Arts Curator resident at the Al Balad Arts Residency in the historical district of Jeddah, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and a 2019 Fellow of Reporters Without Borders, Germany. He has produced video documentaries exploring the identity of cultural and artistic producers of outside diaspora across the world. Thank you for joining us. And then the host of this panel, the one who wrote the AC, is Carl Tever. He is a Nigerian writer of Tever ancestry. He graduated from BSU Makurdi with a BA in English. He is a noted style critic, an essayist, editor, and a poet known for his minimalist poetry in style of 7th century Japanese poet Hitomaru. His writing has been published in Afapinen, The Republic, Goethe Institute Nigeria, the Stockholm Review, Olongo Africa, Iskenchi, amongst others. In 2020, his short story, The Song of Blue Jack, was selected for the inaugural anthology of the Toyin Falola Prize. And in 2024, he was longlisted for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize. He is the author for Girl at Rubicon and Glory to the Sky. Thank you, Carl, and I hand over to you.
Thank you for your wonderful introductions. It's good to be here again. Welcome to day 2 of CapFest. Sada, it's really nice to see you finally. You're welcome. Zainab and Sadiq, we've had informal chats since the CapFest began. I wish Nana didn't read that opening paragraph. I was wishing I wanted to read it myself. But in a nutshell, this is what it is. You have, it's in the distant future, there are miners working at a site and they find a strange accidental mineral. The sample is taken to the lab and the scientists say, oh, this is poetry. And of course, they play on the word poetry, but they say it has no value. The miners can keep working. So some years back, I watched a movie where they worked. It was a thought experiment of some philosophy students. Imagine a nuclear fallout, and we need to preserve humans. After the fallout, they will come out and continue the human race. So everybody will stand on the soapbox and tell them why you deserve to go into the bunker. A geologist comes, says fine things, they clap for her, they allow her into the bunker, a structural engineer and agriculturalist. When a poet stands on the soapbox, he says, I am a poet. Before he would complete the word poet, he's shot in the forehead. And so the thought experiment begins again in the class. Up to the third time, once the poet climbs the soapbox and says, I am a poet, he's shot him up to the third time. So it was a very strange thing for me as a poet when I was watching the movie. I was like, what's this? What's going on? So my essay, does anyone care about your poem, was written on the last day of 2022. And I was just thinking about the whole idea of writing poetry, what it means today, and also all my random thoughts just came to mind and I put it down. So I've always thought about it, because truly, it's as if when you're talking about poetry, only poets read poetry. Even writers, some are getting tired of poetry because they feel they have to pour over the poem so much to understand what the poet is saying. So we poets reading ourselves. So what is the currency of poetry today? What does it mean? Can it be anything? Does it mean anything to us today? I'll give the floor to you. I want to hear your answers. And you also tell us how writing poetry for you has been beneficial, if it has transformed the world around you, or you wish to transform the world around you, and so on and so forth. So, Sada, what do you want to say? Start with the poets. Oh, the poet. I think I was
Are you
wondering. Okay, so it yes. So you have the floor.
Okay. Sorry. Question
Does poetry have any currency today?
today. I guess it does. I guess I would say it does to an extent, but maybe not on the same level as cryptocurrency. I think I heard you mention something like that, cryptocurrency. But I don't think it even has what it takes, to it even is a comparison it should be made because I think those two things serve different
Okay,
purposes.
no, sorry. I didn't say cryptocurrency. I just said currency.
Okay,
What is the currency of poetry today? Does it mean anything?
yeah, it does. It does. I think we have seen in recent times where things happen, around the world. For me personally, I've witnessed situations whereby things happen and people, at some point find such solitude in in words. It was in a way that no other art form, can grant them or give to them. So in a nutshell, poetry, I'm finding it difficult to like articulate my thoughts right now. I might be nervous and tense. Yeah, strange, very.
It was my fault for putting you on the spot.
Yeah, on the spot, she did that.
Okay, thank you. Zainab, what would you say?
Okay. I think it does
All right.
because we have seen in a lot of situations where poetry is used, it has been used, and still being used to for change around the world. And for me personally, I take writing poetry as a form of documentation because if I am to give an example of what is happening in the northern state of Nigeria, which was most of my poems focuses on, especially my second chapter, which is like entirely about insecurity, the ongoing instability. I take it as a form of documentation because the media say less about those things. So with time, it is going to diffuse and everybody is going to forget about it. Even we should pray that with time everything will come back to normal as it was before, peaceful as it was before. But people will get to forget about it because there's no element of documentation. So I think it's personally to document those happenings. So at the point of documentation, that is exactly like failure it is needed. It's very important.
Okay. Documented for who exactly?
For the upcoming generation.
When was the first time you read a poem?
I read a poem or I wrote a poem.
You read a poem.
Um,
Bluetooth mode. Yeah. Okay, when last did I read a poem? First time I read a poem. It was okay. I believe in secondary school, even though at that time I only knew the definition of a poem as a form of literature written in stanzas and rhymes. So I think it was in secondary school.
Why I was asking is you said your poetry is a form of documentation. I feel that it's an art form that not many people get to read or experience. People are more driven towards visual arts like movies, auditory arts like spoken word and music. And I feel like when you say it's for documentation, there are just a few number of persons who might stumble on that. So does that not trouble you?
but it's changing actually
Okay.
because the poets we know while growing up were very few. Like I don't think I know of any Nigerian poets right now. I get to know of them 5 years ago when I started writing poetry. So, but now we have a lot of upcoming Nigerian poets that I believe we are going to have more.
Okay.
So that is professional.
All right. Thank you. Sada?
Question.
Yes, the same question.
And I like the answer I pick up in terms of when Sadiq mentioned solitary documentation, which are quite valid points that you write. Also, teaching your question of currency and does poetry now have currency? And it makes me think, was there a time when it had currency, and then are we comparing it to now when it doesn't have currency? And if there was, then what was that time that poetry had currency? And what sort of poetry are you talking about? Just Nigerian poetry? If so, at what point did Nigerian poetry have currency? Did it? And is there like a decline? You think there's a decline of currency of poetry right now? So that's one angle. Then, secondly, thinking of when you say when we say poets, poetry is not very read by the general population, but only by poets. I find that also hard to believe. I will agree maybe with the visual art forms, there is more patronage. But when I'm thinking of the written art form, I think the easiest thing to read is poetry. It's the most accessible. You can read it on the go. You now see it on social media. just being posted. When it's started on Facebook initially, people come in, read poetry, leave comments on it, which I feel had more readership than say a novel, a short story. But I don't see those complaints that only short story writers read short story, only essays read essays. So I don't know why there's the idea that only poets read poetry. The majority of people that I know stumble on writing through poetry and then move on to the bigger or longer version of art form. So those were the things that I was thinking when you were given those questions.
Thank you very well for your answers. There are some poets in the house here. Sadiq said solitude. Though I didn't get the context. Is it you find solitude in it, or you have solitude with poetry?
No, I find
You find solitude.
yes.
Okay. Thank that you mentioned the social media and stuff. But if you take notice also, you would find out that when you're on social media as a particular person, let's say a writer, for example, or within a community of writers, you tend to have mutuals who tend to be in the same community. Now, there are so many poets here who have not published anything like a chapbook or thanks to chapbooks now, poets even get to publish. Some poems and poets can have a collection for 5 years, not found a publisher because nobody really cares for it. Publishers in Nigeria, from the bigger names to the smaller names, when they put calls for submission, it's always closed. And some will even make the effort to tell you we are not accepting unsolicited poetry submission. So that is one angle that I'm coming from too. They're like, because it doesn't have currency, we don't want to publish it. You get so many poets operate in solitude, and I feel that sometimes when I mean solitude, that they're kind of like alone. So the only time that they may get some kind of interaction is when they meet fellow poets or a very niche audience that are interested in that poetry. Now, also to your other question about if there was a time in Nigerian poetry or poetry worldwide, poetry had currency. For Nigerian poetry, I wouldn't say I know much, but I know that in the medieval times in the European world, for example, when you had poets like Shelley, Wordsworth, in courts, in king's palaces, poets could perform, as a form of entertainment. People could read poems off heart, the memorizing poetry was a thing. So, but I think after when we entered the modernist tradition, there has always been a cry for the decline of what poetry offers to the society, if it's of any value at all. And that is why sometimes it's always appreciated in niche gatherings. So that is where I've come from. I've given you enough background to go further. Yes, Sada.
I don't know whether there's a question there, but maybe just to later on that, to also bring it back to the Nigerian context. I feel like with every generation, there is currency. It depends on who is valuing that currency. Zainab was mentioning the poetry we read growing up. Growing up in secondary school, I read poems from Neil Oshundari and that generation. Those were Wole Soyinka's generation. Those were the poets that we believed had value. And to me, at that time, poetry had currency because Wole Soyinka was a Nobel laureate. There was no great currency than that. Of course, he dabbled in a lot of different genres, but that was validation. That was enough currency. The Anna series of poetry, those were also books I grew up reading. So maybe this is also very possible. I think in that with every generation, the currency depends on the mood of the country or even the economy of the country. Why we don't have enough books being published right now is because books are very expensive to publish. Publishers here I said that they weren't as expensive, let's say 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So it also reflects on the economy that we're living in. That's why now we look at digital versions of poetry, chapbooks. They are easily accessible. And I still believe that poetry has always been the most accessible art form, at the same time being a very fine art form, in that its accessibility does not really dilute it's quality. If you are really looking for quality, I also think of magazines that do not accept poetry submission, that they have to solicit for it. If you work with any magazine publisher, when you have a call for submission and you have poetry, you have a short story, you have essay, you have a full-blown novel, you're going to have a million poetry submissions before you see 100 short stories, before you see 10 essays, before you see one novel. So what's the value? Is that a skill for value, or is that a skill for populist writing? So I don't know whether the rest of the panelists maybe are going to have something on that.
Yeah, I would like to hear what they have to say.
All right. Come to think of it, a poet is meant to write a poem, right? So after writing the poems, I don't think he needs to do anything again because he has already written it. Writing it is actually the most important thing. Like he has already written, the poems are there. Maybe if he gets opportunity to be published, either a chapbook or a full-length collection, he has already done that. Then the government are now left to push those books to the upcoming generation so that it will now have the value you're talking about. That's my own perspective.
So you mentioned something about how the difficulty, something along the lines of difficulty of like publishing your collections. I think the writing and publishing are like two separate things. I personally I separate those two activities. When I am writing, I don't think about where the work is going to get to. My work is to do the writing first. Where the work ends up in, I have no control over or of. And another thing that I believe in is in that once the work is written, it will always find its readers, especially with poetry. So, and they're like, thanks to the age that we're in today, there are so many outlets, that are willing to like, welcome poetry. There are magazines that, in past years do not publish poetry or even welcome poets into their circle. But today we're seeing changes in that. There are magazines that are opening that solely dedicated to publishing poetry alone. There are so many of them. So my work as a poet first is to do my writing and hope. I can only hope that it finds its readers, and if it doesn't find its readers, I will hope that the readers find the work.
Okay, thank you. Interesting so far. So there is also the condescension to poetry. I don't know about your experiences, but like Sada said, when you have a so-called submissions, the poetry submissions are more than every other genre. And it reminds me of a quote I saw somewhere recently. The problem is not that there is too much art. The problem is that when there's too much art, it becomes bad. So we are all in the writing community, and we've heard we sometimes we're in the room and people like to like downplay, what poetry is. Some will even say anybody, can be a poet. That's you don't need to be an essayist, a prose writer. It's the threshold for entry is so low. So you can be anybody can be a poet. It's one of those things that I would like to us to explore. What do you think? Is it true? Or is there some legitimacy in that? And does it affect the value of poetry that we are seeing?
Okay, I think inherently every human being is a poet.
Thank you.
I think our ability to observe our immediate environment um, and articulate it in words that probably some things better than others. I guess that's where we begin to hear things about what poetry is good and which is bad. But I think of course everyone like has their own process of writing. They have their own process of writing, and in a way, I think those processes can affect the quality of the work that is produced. Say for example, poetry, good poetry, in my opinion, requires a lot of time. Lots of time. Like you need to like spend so much time with your works if you really want it to like be good. Then there are people whose processes, whose process of writing poems involves them just writing probably once in, don't want to say a blue moon, but yeah, once in a very long time. You will not compare the quality of it might not it might be like subjective, but I feel it's very likely that the quality of the work that you're going to produce after writing for like once 6 months will be different from someone who has to like do this thing for virtually day in day out. He has spent so much time with the work. He knows which creases need to be like ironed out, what was because poetry is essentially a selective process, picking out the right words that that sing on the page, and you need a lot of time to decipher or know which words sing and which one do not, and that is where revision comes in. The person who is very dedicated to his work, writing virtually, of course not every day, but he spends more time with his work, finds it easier, knowing which of those words to keep and which one to leave out if they do not serve the poem any good.
Right. Thank you. So our panel is still, does anyone care about poetry? So I would like to invite the audience to hear their thoughts. Yes, there's a hand over there. Please, someone has the mic. I have very, very successful poets on stage, so I think for them, poetry really works. Everybody cares about poetry.
Thank you very much. Carl, my name is Ismail Bala. Thank you. This is a fascinating discussion, one that is not just topical, but is very important in the context of what is happening currently in the Nigerian literary thing. I want the panelists to look at an essay written by an American sometime in 1992 or 93 by Dana Joya, the one-time president of the National Endowment of Humanities, who himself is a poet of repute. In 1993, he argued that the decline of poetry in the United States, generally in the West, was because of the MFA, the Master's Art degree, Fine Art degree, the Master's degree in poetry, which he argued then, as it's still relevant now, that it makes all Americans sound the same. And he said the proliferation of writing programs has made everyone sound the same. That there is a small cycle of poets who I scratch your back, you scratch my back, you recommend me for a fellowship, I review your book, and then I also recommend you for a prize. It's a cyclical process, which, if you compare it with what is happening in Nigeria, is almost the same. Yesterday, we talked about the dominance of grief in Nigerian poetry, with apology to my brother Kamal Bola, and the fact that, well, whether rightly or wrongly, publishers claim that poetry does not sell. Coupled with the decline in book reviewing, if you look at the newspaper, which basically are the main source of book review in Nigeria, I don't think there is any newspaper now that runs book review. And even if there are newspapers that do that, probably it's not as important or as significant as it was in the years past. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you ask a question? Okay. Does everybody have something to say? Okay, one thing I picked though from what he has said was the fact that we write less about poetry now. So why is that also happening? Why are people not writing about poetry anymore?
Like people writing poems about poetry.
No, essays, criticism, reviews about poetry.
But you are doing that.
Yes, I'm doing that.
And I think also it's not like it's not the job of the poet to do that. It's still the job of the essays, the critic, the book reviewers, the newspapers, magazines. And I really like what guys might have mentioned, in that one aspect of then when it was Daily Trust, New Nigerian, and then Blueprint, you want to have your poem published on that their weekly point. That was some kind of value. So it just made me think of also your question when you're saying, is it that when we write, when more people are writing poetry, does that diminish its value? To me, it's like saying, oh, the more we have poetry festivals, then poetry festivals are being. I don't think so. I don't think the value of the arts attached to how much content is coming out of it. It still goes back to what are other people reading it, are other people engaging it, and I think we diminished Facebook poetry, especially when a lot of young writers started writing poetry on Facebook, in that it wasn't quality enough because there was no gatekeeper. I think it's also what organizers mentioned, in that once you have that structure that says, okay, this is a magazine, if you submit to this magazine, the poetry has to be like this, and whoever published in this magazine is the one that has value, then everybody is going to aspire to write like that. And I think what gave us that leverage on Facebook then was there was no gatekeeping, in that there was no structure. You can write what you want to write and you can leave it there. So the value now depends on whoever is reading it, on whoever is valuing it. So it's a very difficult to say, okay, this is poetry that is really excellent. Who is determining that? Is it the magazine? Is it the MFA programs? Is it ANA? Is it CapFest? So who is determining? Is it Calteva based on his essay that is saying this poetry is the best? And then it now becomes a problem when everybody tries to write like those poems that Calteva is mentioning, and then Calteva now comes back and says everybody is writing like this poetry. But that's the problem with gatekeeping, with criticism, with structures. And I think poetry is one genre that always tries. We might see people going towards one end, but there are always people going towards the other end. So maybe we also need to widen our horizon of what we are reading, who we are looking at, what we are engaging in terms of poetry.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, more hands now. The house is getting heated up. Feel that person. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, after he, please, you order.
Thank you. And I'm happy that I find myself in the midst of scholars like this. Even though I'm from science background, microbiology to be precise. What I want to say pertaining writing poems, maybe I should just say that people seems not to have focus about who they want to be in life. And that's why people are not writing poems these days. Like in my own case, I discovered in 1999, I started with love poems. And just like 1.5 years back, I just reflected on my dreams. And I said that I'm gifted in writings, like poem. And I just decided since that, like 1.5 years back, to start writing something on poems. And to the glory of God, I've written like 55, which I'm here to publish. Somebody is trying to proofread it for me, one of our prof, the person of prof, Dr. Leikubi, is the one that is proofreading it for me. So that might be one major reason why people, even though that's in addition to what our prof has said, that maybe because it's not selling, people are not making money. Forget about money. Anything you want to do in life, put in your best first. Then money, fame, or whatever follows. God bless you.
Thank you. All right. Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. My name is AbuBakr, English department, UK. I think the discussion has been very interesting so far. One thing I've observed and which you have raised about poetry is you find publishers are unwilling to pick up works done by poets. largely because of the market, because of the economics of production of the work. And then also you'll find that nowadays, even in the universities, we are guided by some rules, if you like. You have what you call the canon. When works are not recommended or found within the established canon of poets or writers who are already established, you find young poets struggling to be recognized. But I think that the most important thing is, just like you have said, I think poets should keep writing, and I think that a new platform is emerging. In the past, people write poems, write them, they are never read anywhere, they are never presented. But now, poems are being performed. Now, performance is creating a new platform, a new arena or avenue where poets can be heard, can be seen, can be heard and appreciated. The most important thing is that in that way, you will find that poets who are outstanding will definitely be recognized. And as it is now, a few of these emerging poets are being discussed, are being written about. It's not that they are not being written about, except that the volume is marginal. Yeah. I think that there is an emerging interest in these poets, but particularly poets, these emerging poets should also learn to understand that there is more to poetry than the art. Exactly. The society, Nigerian society now is held up by a lot of crises. And any writer who really wants to be heard anywhere needs to recognize some of these crises, needs to identify them, needs to feature them in his writing. Because without doing that, just taking for so many of the poets here who come to perform so here, of course, that's one aspect. But a poet needs to carry the society along. It's the burden of the writer to carry the weight of the society on his shoulders. So, lastly, I want to ask a question for the writers. I don't know, but why do you write poems? Sadiq, I think you said a solitude, a refuge. It creates an avenue where you go to hide, where you go to nurse your wounds and other emotional aspects. But I think writing is therapeutic. It's therapeutic. Have you found out that it's therapeutic for you? It takes away some of the lumps in your heart and so many things. If you think that writing is therapeutic, do you have poems which have served as an attempt, as an attempt or a healing process for you?
Thank you. A round of applause for him, please. Sadiq, you want to answer that? Okay, so just to clarify what you said about me finding or finding solitude, refuge in writing. It is not particularly to hide. It is sort of a process that helps me to contend with the current situations of my immediate environment. I come from Shiro in United States, and over there over the years we've had to like deal with several issues of insecurities, banditry, and all of that. And sometimes I wish they were like more talked about than they do, because I've had the experience of losing personal relatives, to these insecurities, and so that most of them don't make it to the news. So when I sit to write, it is in honor of those people that I've lost and the things that are happening around me. So I'm not going in there to hide. You can say, in a sense, I am going there into my writing to sort of like meet with them, because in my writing, I'm bringing them back alive. Talking about people who are no longer with us physically in my writing is a way of, keeping them alive. You know,
I think that's the therapeutic thing he was talking about.
yeah, it is.
So does poetry do that for you?
Yeah, it does.
I
Absolutely.
think your question is answered.
Yes.
Miriam, sorry, Zainab, want to say something?
Okay. Yeah, to me too, writing is therapeutic because I have found myself in several occasions. I found myself dealing with a lot of things, and immediately I write about those things. It's like I've let them out. Not that I've forgotten about them completely, but at least I have given them a voice through writing. And yes, I have written, I think, all poems out of the challenges happening in Nigeria.
Crisis.
And also, sorry, um, to talk about what Dr. Ismail Bella said
Okay.
about MFA and
Yeah.
writers sounding like one another.
Like cousins.
Yes, yes, it's true actually. Yes, it's true. But also, it is also the work of the writer during the program or after the program. You learn and then you unlearn some things. You pick what works for you and then you leave what doesn't work for you. You went there with a voice. It's your work to make sure that your voice is being preserved.
Surely. All right. Thank you. You have something to say, Sada? Okay. We have some hands here. Is that Idris? Okay, Idris, and then Oliam. After Poliam. No, Idris first. Idris. Please make your contributions or questions as short as possible.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Idris. So I was going to say something about do people care about poetry?
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think for anything that has an audience, people care about it. And for the fact that it's something that is gaining more recognition every year, I think the people caring about it are increasing. Now, how they care about it is where I think it goes back to the poet. Do they just bring the poems for people to say, oh, this thing rhymes, and oh, see how they talk on? It's nice. Should we keep it at that? Or then we get everyone that should care about it involved. Oh, the people who review the poems, people who care about it on a deeper level, and all of that. For the main question, do people care about poetry? I think yes.
All right, thank you. Please a round of applause for Idris, Poliam, and then hello. There was a hand there. Okay.
Thank you. I think this is a very important conversation, even though I think Sada is on the wrong panel. Yeah, his insights are not for that panel. And however, the contextualization of the problematics of whether or not poetry still has currency. It's a very important subject. I have been curious, to really hear what the poets and the guests on the stage have to say regarding this question. But sadly, I have not really been satisfied. I don't know whether it's how Carl framed the question. But of course, poetry still has currency. That is why we are here today. Some persons who believe in the currency of poetry have conceived the idea of bringing us together from different parts of the country to come and share in this currency. One is maybe unity. One is a platform for engagement such as we are doing, which is as a result of poetry. Again, the two poets on the stage are some of the shining examples of the currency that poetry is today, in terms of even economic impact, in terms of fame, in terms of poetry as a means of attaining global recognition. These are global artists, by whatever definition we want to look at today, because of the international awards that they have won, writing from wherever they are in Nigeria. So yes, I think poetry's currency is gaining more agency today than it did, say, 10, 20 years ago when I started writing. I've been writing for at least 20 years now. And I know that the reality during my time and the reality of the people on stage is not the same. It's not the same. The value we attach to poetry, the value we were trained to attach to poetry is also different. We were told that don't write for fame. We were told that don't write for money. We were told that write because of the passion that you have for poetry. That was our orientation. I hardly enter for prizes because I don't feel like it. Because the orientation is that that is not why I am writing. But these guys on the stage came with a different orientation. They understood what they wanted, and because of that, they were able to gain leverages and gain that international recognition. But of course, they had the examples of Sadiq Zukoki, Romeo Riobo, and all of these guys that are showing this generation that you can become a celebrity, you can make money, you can live a good life as a poet. That is telling us the possibilities that poetry holds for you or for us as poets. If we are willing to explore, if you are willing to understand, if you are willing to put in the work. There is an issue, again, about gatekeeping. It's also a problematic issue. Sada is speaking mostly from an administrative perspective, as I have observed. But it's raising also very valid question. Yes, at that point that this generation were coming up, Facebook provided a more accessible platform, but it came with a liability. The liability was and still is that there is no metrics for determining what is a standard poem in the sense that we were trained. I'm using us because they were standards, they were metrics. Oh, your poem had to be like this, your metaphors had to sound like this, or you needed to use this sort of imageries to be able to convey what was considered an efficient poem. But with the coming of the digital space and expansion of the platform, because I know this because in 2016, I started to critique this engagement where I described this group as the internet poet. And it put me in a very terrible situation. So, but what I'm saying is there are challenges in the system. Not every poem, for example, may be considered a meritorious poem. But it is a poem as long as people are enjoying it with the coming of spoken word or the elaboration of the spoken word, it has also expanded the appreciation of poetry. So I think this conversation is really complex and dynamic, and trying to hasten up and taking more time already, but maybe afterwards I should be able to talk if there are opportunities for us to, talk more on this. But I think so far it's a good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. You always have good things to say. Please, over there. Thank you.
I was starting to think that maybe you're not. Yeah, my name is Ravi Sharma. I'm really happy to be here. My question to the panelists. I want them to be specific, please, because I have the experience of getting publishers, to publish, especially work of poetry. So I don't know whether the panelists will give us any specific, company or publishers that upcoming poets can apply, for their works to be published. Because I'm saying this because I had the experience 10 years back when we had an anthology of a group. It was a Facebook group, Literature and the World. We collected entries from members of that group. Anthologies, 70% of the entrants were poets or poetry. So we went, out looking for publishers. It was actually a very Herculean task. We couldn't got any publishers. We even went to some individuals. I remember we went to the late Bashir Tofa of blessed memory. He said he will publish the work, but only when we translate the whole work to Hausa language. You are talking of more than 300 pages. So we couldn't, publish. Though I'm happy that as a result of attending this workshop today, we were talking with friends. I think Bello was here and Abdulaziz, so the personal assistant to the president, who was one of the editors. I think Malam Ismail Bala was also one of the editors then. So only yesterday, after 10 years, Malam Abdulaziz promised to sponsor the publication of that anthology. So please, I want the panelists to suggest how can upcoming poets get publishers to publish their work. Then quickly, I know maybe we will have panel to discuss the effect of artificial intelligence. I know now with advent of ChatGPT and all that, you can just go, you can just ask ChatGPT, please write a poem on so, and it just go. You see a complete poem. So, as a poet, is there any way that you can identify this is an original poem, or maybe it's a poem that the writer used, ChatGPT or any artificial intelligence app to write, and what is it a blessing or a curse for poetry with the emergence of artificial intelligence? Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your contribution and your questions. I'm being warned that we don't have enough time, so I'll just answer your question. Your problem of publication, it's an issue about 10 years ago, and kindly, you're going to be publishing that anthology very soon. I think from that time till now, a lot has changed. If you ask these poets to tell you where to publish, they're going to give an endless list of publishers. And the internet has made things very easy. If you're in the right space online, you would always see calls for submissions every day. Like every day, there are always those opportunities to publish. Well, of course, if we want to meet them after this panel and ask them for that, they will give it to you. I think that other question about AI, if it's a blessing or a curse, should be left for that panel. Nana? It was the first panel. Oh. Okay. Well, personally, I have asked ChatGPT to write a poem like that, and they're actually quite horrible. And it always use the traditional rhyme scheme, that kind of thing. So if you're very keen, have a very critical eye, you can easily spot a poem ChatGPT has written. And of course, there are apps to always check for whether a work was written by a robot or a human being, and I think it has a near perfect success rate. Thank you all for being part of this panel. I asked a question and I have found my answers. We are all very positive about poetry. But of course, you can hear from the audience that people are also talking about how it became difficult or how they are still struggling to publish poetry and so on and so forth. Thank you, Sada. Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, Sadiq. Thank you, everybody.
Sada, I think you should just sit down. Okay, group pictures, please. Please put your hands together once more. That was a very interesting panel. I hope you have been convinced and not confused that poetry is really important and people care about poetry. We're going into the very next panel, and after which we'll break for lunch. We will then take the third panel to be returned from lunch. And this panel is a Hausa panel, Wakoki definition.